You are listening to This is Oklahoma, hosted by Mike Hearn, telling stories of Oklahomans and those that have made it their home.
What's up, guys? Welcome back to an episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, host, back with another episode. Excited to share this episode with you today, but before we do, huge shout out to our sponsors. The Oklahoma Hall of Fame have been sharing Oklahoma's story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com. And for daily updates, go to oklahomahof on Instagram and give them a follow. Our other sponsor today is the Chickasaw Nation. Now, the Chickasaw Nation have sponsored pretty much everything in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma. And it's an honor to have their name and their brand supporting this podcast. So a huge shout out to Governor Anatobi for supporting this podcast. It really means a lot. Our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my two pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my two golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Citizens Banks, where I bank. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other. Turn your dream home into a reality with Home Creations, a family-owned and operated builder with over 40 years of trusted experience right here in Oklahoma. Call Holly at 405-364-9999 to schedule a showing or visit our website for more details. Home Creations, building homes, shaping futures, strengthening communities.
So you got a partnership with Bedford, I guess?
Yeah, they're
cool.
Bedford's are awesome. They're a sponsor of the podcast. This is like
it was strange. I was like, what a strange place to have
it is, right? So you come down
great.
here and you're like, oh, this is awesome. And the everything's rented from Bedford's. They give us everything.
That's so nice.
Yeah, and then I have a discount code for photographers because of everything with the Instagram page. It's all photography based. And so they're all, wanting, cameras and all the rest of it. And so our discount code, I think, is 5 or 10% off, which if you're spending $10,000 on a drone or a big camera setup,
I just sold all my camera stuff.
Oh, really?
I was wanting to do, be self-sufficient, but I'm a great recording engineer. I've got a studio, but I am not. I'll hire people.
That's also the reason I like to come here to do it, because if I need something, the guys are awesome. And so they'll help and figure things out. But
they know their stuff.
Let's just roll into it then. Cool. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of This is Oklahoma. Mike Hearn here, your host, back with another episode down at Bedford's with the one and only Mr. Johnny Manchild from Johnny Manchild and the Unfortunate Bastards.
The Poor Bastards.
The Poor Bastards. Okay. I was thinking of, what's that? Inglourious Bastards, the movie. Oh. Great movie. Yeah, a lot of music talk going on today. Excited to dive into it. I have no musical gene in my body, which is unfortunate because most people from Wales can sing, play guitar, write poems, or whatever it is.
Love Florence.
Yeah, all of that thing. I don't have any of that, which is unfortunate. But excited to dive into your story, and obviously you got some big things coming up, big year, new singles coming out, new album, all the cool stuff that's happening. But before we do, as we do with the podcast, is we like to set some context and talk a little bit about you. So. Okay. Tell me a little bit about where you were born and raised, and how you get into the music world, and why you take an interest in music.
God. Well, I was born in Oklahoma City, and then a bit of an army brat. So I was We were, Fort Campbell and throughout Kentucky and Tennessee for a while. Came back here as a kid. Somewhere in that mix, I think the way that it is told to me is that I was like ADHD as hell and put on Ritalin, and it put me as a child into like kid depression, I guess. And so instead, I think I used to, this is pretty far back, but I guess I used to play on like a little Tykes drum, and it was surprisingly rhythmic and stuff. And so they're like drum set. And so I was like 4 or 5 when I started playing drums, and took lessons from 8 to like 17. And then somewhere in there I picked up, I guess to get specific, but not too specific. When I was 10, I was in my first band, this band called Refuge. And we toured around a little bit. We did pretty well. And when it broke up, we each got like $1,500 or $2,000 or something like that.
Oh, really?
Which
as a 10-year-old?
As a 12-year-old by the time we broke up. And so I bought like I have to give context here because I feel like it matters, but a little bit. But this was like 2007, and so Year Zero had just come out by Nine Inch Nails. And when they did that, they put out all of the stems and the project files for the whole record, and so you could open it up and you could dig through. Yeah. And between that and the recording sessions I'd done with Trent Bell at Bell Labs in Norman, I had like I was super into recording, and so I bought a Tascam Porta Studio and an acoustic guitar and like mics and stuff, and I started getting into that and learning to. The same way like Trent Reznor did, I was like, he does everything, so I learned how to play all the parts so I could start writing, and just by doing that from like 12 to 16 or so, I learned bass and guitar and piano and learned how to like compose all that together. And it just kind of, I've always been into music. I did jazz band in high school and All-State and stuff. Yeah. Went to college for jazz performance. I was in the Army band as well for 5 years. And it's always been music.
Yeah. Well, so earliest memories is of you just smashing away at a drum set, just kind of keeping yourself occupied and trying to...
Yeah, like I've been asked that question because I feel like it's a common one for anybody. It's like, when did you decide or know that music was your thing? And I honestly cannot remember that being a decision. I just always did. So
where does the passion for kind of not specifying in just one and wanting to compose and bring it all together and then learning all of them? Because that's a serious skill to learn all of them, to bring it all together and write.
Well, so that's why I mentioned the Nine Inch Nails thing. Because I think that was the first time I ever got to dig into stuff and see how it was all put together, and I thought it was interesting. Like, it's rare that somebody, like an artist, will put out project files where you can solo out each track and really hear what's going on, and so that helped foster that. I think and really it was also out of necessity because I didn't have a lot of friends growing up, especially like once I got a car, I started going to shows, I started making friends, but before that I really didn't have any. And so all I did was sit around and play and record. And even before I got into recording, all I had was a camcorder, and I would literally take videos of me playing each part and then rip the audio and put it together. Like I just think I always wanted to write songs. And since I was by myself, I just had to learn every part. Yeah. So that was it.
Did you take to one, obviously after learning the drums, did you take to anything naturally come after that as far as, guitar, bass, piano?
Guitar came fast, and I don't know why. It just did. And then piano was, I think there was a lot of practice, but I don't think I realized it. Because the whole way that I picked up piano, I went to class in SAS, and they had uprights in all the hallways, like 6 of them throughout the school. And I would be, after school got out, I'd have to wait every day until my parents got off work to pick me up. And so I would just play piano. And I think I just picked it up along the way. Obviously, like later on in high school, there was some class piano stuff, but I'd already gotten past that for the most part. And I think college really solidified my piano stuff because I tested out of all the class pianos and got to take 2 years of classical. I took 1.5 years of jazz piano, and even though I was there for a jazz percussion degree, I really got into piano, and started this band while I was there. Yeah. So that took over, but bass and guitar happened quickly. I don't know. I really don't remember learning half of this stuff. It just happened.
It comes naturally to you that you can understand it and pick it up. And is anyone in your family musical as well?
Oh, my mom, I guess, was in like choir a little bit when she was a teenager. Nothing much. She's like IT at Farmers, and then my dad's a mailman. He played a little bit of guitar.
Mm-hmm. So not to the extent that you're at.
No, they never. It wasn't like a career or even anything like that.
Yeah.
My dad did. We did do a cover band together when I was like 7. It was like
really?
7 or 8, I think. It was like the first thing I'd done. We were in a Nirvana cover band for a while, so that helped.
Yeah.
I think.
Obviously, they have a passion for music as well.
For sure. I think he used to be a lot more into it, for sure, when I was younger.
Yeah.
He was a metal guy, for the most part.
Okay. So you can remember just listening to, obviously, mum or dad playing music around the house or in the car, and it's...
Well, yeah.
subconsciously influences you in a certain way.
Well, I do. I mean, at first I think it was subconscious. My dad he had like the Kill 'Em All box set with Metallica, and he's the reason I started listening to like Misfits and Megadeth and all that stuff. But I had 2 moms growing up after a certain point, and my other mom, Phoebe, was with my real mom, Gayla, but Phoebe was a punk chick, and she introduced me. That was like a big thing for me. She introduced me to like Dead Kennedys and The Descendants and Rage Against the Machine and like Bitch and Animal and Bikini Kill and L7 and all this other stuff. And so that was a huge thing. That was like a massive influx of all this other type of music I never heard. Even like Ani DeFranco and Tori Amos and these piano artists and Fiona Apple, like that was a huge switch from metal and punk to this other stuff. So that was a very not subconscious at all. It was a very apparent switch up for me.
How old are you when that happens?
About 8. About 8 and 9 is when I started picking up all that stuff. I was definitely into like punk and thrashier stuff. Like I liked Green Day and Weezer and all that too, but like I don't think the jazz and like other fusion elements hit until I was like 15 or so. Okay. So yeah, grunge and stuff was definitely my initial like huge love, I guess.
Yeah. Where does the kind of jazz kind of injection come from? Because obviously you do that, then obviously there's a love there because you end up going to college for it. But where does that start and how does that start?
That was weird. I don't. So it was definitely because of high school, because I was wanting to be. The best thing that you could do at my school as a drummer was be the drummer for the jazz band. Okay. But the year that I entered it, the drummer that they hadn't graduated yet, and so I became the guitarist, which was I wasn't ready, but I got ready. Mm-hmm. I learned, and so I had to study like Charlie Christian and
which is impossible,
well,
because he's incredible.
Yeah. So he's the fundamental for. I mean, okay, so yeah, like jazz started as like chord-based stuff as a harmonic instrument for the guitar, but then eventually with people like him moved into a more melodic, soloistic thing, and so I got really into that and learned like basic jazz harmony and melody through that, and then the next year I got to be the drummer, and so like through that study I did get really into it, and then somewhere along the way there was the infusion of like neo-soul, and I got into like two of my like records that I love from that genre were recorded at the same time, which is Mama's Gun and Voodoo. Okay. And so like it was definitely, I think Mr. Irons, Reggie Irons was the teacher, the band teacher and the jazz band teacher, and he is probably the singular reason why I got into jazz so much, because I had to study it to get better. Mm-hmm. But yeah, then I just really liked it. I definitely went through like my standards phase, but that branched out into Erykah Badu and D'Angelo and like Robert Glasper and Kamasi Washington and Snarky Puppy and then Quincy Jones was the big one, okay. I think, which is to be said for everybody, because like that was the thing where you have somebody who's like a jazz great who moved into the pop music sector and killed it, and then you start picking apart music once you have a like harmonic understanding of that side of things, and you realize like, okay, that's why this works and this works, and even in the simple side of things, like there's all this underlying stuff that makes it gel. And so like I realized like as a producer for music and recording, like getting deep into this realm of jazz music and having like a really dialed in understanding of harmony and melody on that side can create even better stuff with everything else, because it really is there. Like Quincy Jones did Thriller. It's the greatest pop record of all time. That's jazz. All the players were studio jazz guys for the most part. Like, it's just yeah, it is the nerd music that makes everything else better.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and then like I said, you have a better understanding. You're picking part of songs, and even though most people, I bet hardly anybody realizes that what you just said, the jazz background to Thriller, when you're understanding your passion, you're just listening to little things that the average person listening to the song doesn't catch on to.
Yeah.
Tell me about going into college and making that decision. Clearly, music's a huge part of your life. You're doing this. What was like end of high school you thinking that, is this a career? Am I gonna, obviously you mentioned starting the band in college. Was it to get to where you are today of having a band and doing, being successful and having millions of streams on streaming platforms, or was it like, I'm going to go to music school to do something and have a career as a teacher or something in music?
It was not I didn't think I was going to start a band.
Yeah.
And so like to put it in perspective, I guess I had always been the drummer or the guitarist or something like that. I was never the front guy.
Yeah.
And my plan was almost the opposite of that. I kind of moved out of that realm of things for a while because like when I graduated high school, I was not in a great spot. It was a really traumatic year for a bunch of reasons, and I had, as is apparent from some of the music I've written, gotten a bit of a drug problem. And like I had friends dying, and I had a bunch of stuff that just wasn't great. And so I literally was just like, all right, I'm gonna join the Army and just go away and try to.
You're obviously in class in SAS. You're in Oklahoma City at this point when you're graduating.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so I did a year at like community college, and I just wasn't ready. I was not in a good spot. I like flunked out horribly as I was just not mentally all right. And so I joined the Army and ended up in the Army band. And I came back, and it was also because I could pay for college that way. So, my plan. I had a couple different ideas. I was like, if nothing else works out, I'll go active duty. I'll go to Europe. I had the Charlie 1 identifier, which is this, if you score high enough on they have an acronym for everything, AMPA, so Army Musical Proficiency Assessment. And so I scored high enough that, I could go to the European bands and do that. And so that was my backup. I was like, why not? But I wanted to potentially be like, I wanted to maybe take a year or so doing like the cruise line thing, playing in a jazz band, like maybe even something with an orchestra, whether it's like a music librarian or actually being part of it, or I don't know. I had envisioned something like that. Never really teaching. That wasn't something I wanted to do. And I do love teaching, but I don't want to be a public school teacher. But yeah, sometime when I was 20, I think it was like March 2016 officially was the first like rehearsal we had. I literally I had gotten out of this other band that I was in for a year, and it just went so badly, and it ended. They like took some of my songs, and I was like, okay, well, I lost that, but if they're, maybe I can write my own. Like, screw it, I'm going to front my own band, because I was just tired of like dealing with that. And so I literally convinced Ethan, he was the first person I talked to, I think, my drummer, to stay after class and like jam on one of these songs with me. And I kind of did that over and over again until I could put together a rehearsal, and then it just kind of went from there. I don't think, even when I graduated college in like 2018, I didn't think it was like my full-time thing. But yeah, 2019 it all picked up, and then we went into COVID, and I don't know, I sort of just ended up doing this. This is my career now. So
things happen for reasons, right? And
that was long-winded. Sorry.
Yeah, no. This is great. Timing's everything. And maybe if you'd have been earlier on in your life, the timing wouldn't been right, and you wouldn't be here today. You're not right to meet the right people. But dive into going in the Army and then getting into the Army band and that whole experience, because there's a lot of people that come from military families that maybe have served themselves, or they're in kind of law enforcement, but they might not understand or know much of the band side of it. So dive into that for me.
There's not much there. I mean, I will say, like, anyone I've talked to, they're like, the Army has a band? Like, they imagine that it's like a side gig you do after you're done doing infantry work, but it's a totally separate thing. So yeah, I went in through the Civilian Acquired Skills Program, which is basically... Sometimes, most of the time, you do that when you have a degree, but in this instance, you have to audition. And so I went into basic training already having the job, and I went in as an E4, which meant that I was mercilessly... throughout basic training.
Where'd you do basic training?
This is the worst part. I was so excited to just leave Oklahoma and get out for a while, and they put me in Lawton.
So you do an artillery in Lawton?
Well, so it is an artillery AIT.
Okay.
But basic training is separate. Now stuff is like blowing up in the background all the time.
Yeah.
But so yeah, if you go to basic training for, I think it was like 11 weeks, 9 weeks, and then you go straight to AIT, or I did. You can split them up sometimes, but my AIT was in Norfolk at what was it called? Little something. It's a while ago now, but it was a joint military base for the Navy, Marines, and Army, and it was all the bands. They were all there, and that was a radically different experience. Because basic training is what you think it is. You're getting messed with mentally. It's kind of it's physically rough. It's not as bad as you think it is, but it's not fun. And it's all like at ease and attention and all this stuff. And I remember I walked into the office after getting off the taxi from the airport at AIT, and I stood at ease, and the sergeant was just like, "It's the weekend." And I was like, "Okay,
oh, this is different."
Yeah, he's like, "You don't have to be in your uniform. You can change into civvies. We start on Monday." And I was like, "Whoa, okay." Yeah. And it was totally different. Their approach with it, at least at the time, was like, we are the military. You have a standard to uphold, this and that, but we're musicians, and you need a space to actually rehearse and do music, and it can't be that way. So it was still rigid, but it really was a focus on music, and I put hours in there. I became a way better drummer, and that actually did get me into Latin music a lot more, because in the military they have MPTs, musical performance teams, and so let's say you have I guess what you'd call a platoon or something, so like 30 people. Out of that, you could get like maybe 4 or 5 MPTs. So you get your rock band, country band, pop band, Latin band, whatever you do. And I was in the Latin band. And so I learned from, I can't remember the sergeant's name off the top of my head, but he was Puerto Rican, Quinones, which is a great place to start from like a Puerto Rican-born guy. He just taught me a lot about like Tito Puente and a bunch of other people playing timbales and congas, and so I deep dived into that for a while. But yeah, my actual career in the Army wasn't great. It was really boring, and we didn't do much. And everybody in my unit was like, music's never going to work. The only career you'll ever have is in the Army. And I was like, cool, thank you.
Great.
But yeah, the training itself though was like invaluable. It was really good. The people in active duty Army bands I have found are actually very musically great players. It's just reserves and National Guard is what I was in, and that's a different thing. Like they were okay musicians, but they didn't really perform or play outside of their military duty, which is once a month. So it was okay.
Yeah. Did you have to travel? Were you sent places, or I assume you weren't deployed or anything, but did you like?
We never got deployed. There was talk of it, but it never happened.
Yeah.
But we had to spend 2 weeks at least every year, and I went to a couple different places, but nothing crazy ever. It was boring.
Yeah. I mean, it sounds like you learned, at least you get something away from it. You talk about your kind of learning the drums, getting much better at it, and your Latin influence as well. Like there's obviously pros to it.
I also can't say so getting deeper into music, there's a point when it does become a career that like you are your own, at least at first for sure, you are your own lawyer and your own accountant, you are your manager, you have so many things to keep track of. And it really, like, there's a difference between being a musician and then being like a performing artist and like a career musician, because it really isn't for everybody, because you have to have a certain mindset and skill set to be able to keep up with all this, where 90% of my work has nothing to do with music.
Right.
And the Army did prep me for that, because like while I was in the supply and logistics chain, so I learned a little bit about like work ethic and discipline and stuff like that. So that did, I think, change me as a person to someone who can work smart, I guess.
Right. Yeah, be efficient, and then give yourself time, when you do dedicate time to writing, that you're in your right headspace and you're not thinking about, accountants or lawyers or all the other stuff that takes away from your creative process.
And I did have to unlearn some things, because there are certain things that just don't gel, especially when you're in musician circles. Like no one really wants to be militant about things. So I had to chill out. It took me a few years to chill out.
Yeah. So tell me about kind of getting out of the military and then going to school, or did you sort of stay within the military but still went to school and getting that paid for? How does that transition, and where do you go to school as well?
So yeah, I was in the military. I went to UCO, and so for I guess I should say, so in 2013, right before I joined in 2014, I had started this recording studio with a friend of mine, and so keep that on the back burner. I went to the military, came back, and that was in early 2015, I suppose. I came back, and I started going to UCO in the fall while I was in the military, and I was also working at a liquor store, and then he had started... he was building out a new space attached to his house, like a whole new construction, and he asked me to work with him there too, and that became Skyloft, which is the second version of the studio. Okay. And so I was working at Skyloft, doing recording a little bit. I was working at the liquor store, doing the military, and going to college, and then I started the band. So I had all that going on, and then 2018, graduated. I think I got out of the military that year as well, right before I graduated. Basically, I was like, okay, I'm not in the military. I'm not in college. I can pretty much do whatever I want. I can grow my hair out. I don't have this thing every month, so I can start planning things. And I didn't have any income or anything from the band yet. It was still all off just money I was making. But like, I was like, let's do a single a month for the whole year. And I was like, I don't know how, because I didn't have the money to record it. But I was like, we'll go to Lunar Manor with Taylor Johnson, and we did like 3 songs at a time for the next 3 months. And during that time, like I did a collaboration or 2, and our audience went from like 1,000 to 25,000 basically in like 2 or 3 days.
Oh wow!
And then from that, we got to like 40,000 by the end of the year. And we were finally like we had income, like stuff was going on, and we scheduled a tour, and then COVID happened. So so weird.
Nice, great timing.
Yeah. Which, I don't know what would have happened if it didn't work out like that. I don't know, because at the time, there were 7 people in this band, and I had them all, it was kind of sharing everything, and I had to move to California for work to, like, keep living in late 2021, and so I did that, and when I did that, I bought everybody out, and I was like, I took ownership of the whole thing, because I've always written everything, but my idea for this was, it was something I was doing with my friends. I wanted this to be something that we all did. But it's, man, doing this now, we would have died. Yeah. There's no way with 7 people that this ever would come close to working. So it's another things happen for a reason, but it's a bittersweet thing. But that, for the most part, gets us to now. Although I guess I should say, 2020, during COVID, right before actually, we finished the construction of Wasted Space, the Studio 3.0, which is where I work now. So, all that in culmination kind of leads to today, I guess.
So you mentioned studio. Before we get to the studio, is the UCO sort of jazz music kind of space a draw, and why is that one of the reasons why you choose UCO over going somewhere else? Because their jazz lab's incredible, right?
It is.
I think Brian Gorrell's been on the podcast. I know Brian's a bit of a legend up there too.
Oh, he's great. His son is too. But yeah, so I had like some ambitions to go into like Berkeley or maybe going to UCLA or something, but I'm broke. Like I was on the OK Go program to do the community college stuff, and so I was like, UCO has such a good reputation, and they have the jazz lab, and they also had a good, classical music program. My first 2.5 years was through like classical percussion performance because they didn't have a jazz degree yet. They had a minor but not a major, and then they opened it up and I transferred. And so, I don't know if like jazz was my whole thing. I just knew they had a good music program, and so I did do classes at the Jazz Lab the whole time. But then also I was in the Wind Symphony. We got to go to Germany in 2017, which was a massive thing. And actually, I guess this can't be. I have to include this. In 2016, I turned 21, and I had been saving from my, pay from basic training, and I just kind of took my tax returns and I saved as much as I could to go on this trip for myself when I was 21. And this trip ended up influencing me a lot musically. Okay. My whole goal was to visit like jazz cities and sit in on sessions and play if I could, and drink because I was 21. So I took the Amtrak for 2.5 weeks in August. Like literally right before the semester started. I was actually late for auditions, I think, because of this. But I went from New Orleans to Memphis to Chicago to New York over the course of 2.5 weeks by train. Yeah. And all of them are great cities. I saw the Preservation Jazz Band, and I saw like all this music in New Orleans, and I saw the soul bands in Memphis. And Memphis was the big one. I remember I went to the Rock and Soul Museum, and they had, in every room, they have like these jukeboxes with a bunch of songs from the eras, and I just wrote everything down because I realized that I like loved soul music. Okay. And that's actually why there ended up being horns in the first stuff that we put out, because I was like, I want horns. But yeah, that was a big influential thing. And I think that probably pushed me more into jazz at UCO because I just really liked it. And honestly, yeah, I realized as I was there that like people like Zach Lee and Brian Gurl and Danny Vaughn, which he's passed now, but he was killer. And then Dennis Paritsky, there are so many great people there, and I realized like these dudes are killer, and I wanted to learn stuff from them. So I did transition into jazz after I got to know what was going on better. Yeah.
Just dive into having the studio, having like a recording space, and how that side of your business side comes from, because clearly sounds like a way to make money. Sort of, quote, sort of, or maybe a write-off, I don't know.
Well, it's a money pit, for sure, but I do love doing it. Okay. And it has saved my ass from time to time. Like it is good work that I enjoy, and I still work in music, which is the big thing. I haven't worked a job outside of music in like 5 years. Yeah. Which is not something to take for granted at all. But no, I just love recording. I am a huge gear nerd. I love ripping apart songs, and I love producing other bands. That's something that I really want to do more as this band grows, is leverage that to work with other people and help make music for them. So yeah, I like recording.
How has that evolved over time with technology and and access to sounds and all that made it so much easier from back in the day when you were like individually ripping 9 Inch Nails songs back?
I mean, yeah, I started with a Tascam Portastudio because they didn't really have consumer entry to like interfaces yet. Okay. So like back then I recorded onto a compact flash and then uploaded it to a computer. And now I remember the first thing they came out with that I had was a PreSonus Fire Studio, and now it was an 8-channel thing that went FireWire, so you could record straight to the computer. And I was like, whoa, this awesome. Is crazy. Yeah. It was like a huge difference. And then, the Apollo stuff came out. UAD developed into what it is. Everything changed really quickly. And now, my stuff has developed a lot. While I was out in California, I got a whole new rig. I could talk about gear forever, but that's not what we're going to do.
Why'd you go to California? You said for work?
Yeah, I had a friend of mine who became very popular, and I went out there to work with him, and then he sort of changed his mind. And so I was stuck in California without work. I was there for only 7 months because I realized like I was working as an audio tech for like film stuff, like doing boom, and I did have a studio spot that I had luckily found for insanely cheap rent. And I was working a bit. I had some mixing jobs I was doing and some recording. I worked at King Size for a second doing a record, which is a nice spot. And while I was there, ended up doing my last record at Prairie Sun, they were closing, and I found out this legendary studio was about to be gone. So we went and did that, and it was a great time. But I realized, if I stayed there, I might be able to survive, but my band is not going to happen. I can't keep this up. So I moved back. But yeah, while I was there, because the idea was I was going to build a studio, and then he dropped out, and I was like, well, so I took out a $15,000 loan, and I bought all this stuff, just the basics of what I thought I would need, and that was kind of the starting place for everything I've got now. But yeah, I am a big gear nerd, so I'm really trying not to talk about specifics about that because it's not interesting.
That's a passion of yours. You just want to. I get it. I golf is my version of I'm a golf nerd, and I love diving into it. So I I understand fighting the urge to nerd out completely on it, and
I can.
Yeah, no, I totally get it. Tell me a little bit about then kind of the journey of the band and starting the band, and obviously you mentioned kind of, you know, how once having 7 people and then, you know, kind of buying everybody out and deciding that, like, you know, for this to survive, and then just that whole journey, because that's not an easy thing to do, especially with all your friends and, you know, moving, coming back. So tell the journey of the band and the story there.
Well, yeah. So, I mean, it started most bands start this way. It's just friends that you want to make music with, and we were all in a music degree too. So, you know, I found them all at college for the most part. And yeah, it started out, you know, at first it's just hard to even get a show. Our first show was at Sauced Pizza, like the second iteration. Now it's on its like 4th, I think. Yeah. But we played stuff like that. Eventually, we graduated to the like Speakeasy once we were all 21, and then I'm still signing affidavits for like one of the members, I think. But yeah, we started playing as much as we could. It built up a little bit. Everything kind of really took off in 2019. I think 2020 was a catalyst for something else, though. I always used to think of this band. I think I was the only one who thought of it this way, but I was like, this is a band. We are a band. But I was writing everything. I wrote the horn parts. I wrote the music, and I was spearheading a lot of the stuff. And I really wanted it to be a group thing. But it did become obvious that, like, this was my project, and not everyone stood to benefit. And, like, I just got to the point where it's like, I can't expect other people to be in this the way that I am. And it's not totally fair, but if it's going to be that way, I'm going to take this thing. I'm going to, like, control it. And I guess I need access to everything if I'm going to survive and do this. And so, yeah, like, we eventually grew to the 7-person thing. We had a saxophone and 2 trumpets and a drummer and a bassist and a guitarist and then me. And we did the We Did Not Ask for This Room record, came out in November. We had a big, awesome show at Tower Theater. And then, yeah, I sold the van. I paid out the bank account evenly to everybody. And I was just like, you know, that was the most I could do. And I moved to California. But even before that, during COVID, I had taken to, like, Twitch and Patreon and other things, and I had started developing, you know, live streaming and just whatever I could do like that. And so when I was in California, after that stuff got dropped and I was kind of screwed, I was like, okay, number one thing I can do, let's start working on Patreon. I've already got, like, I was making like $300 a month. So I was like, let's start there. Yeah. And I developed that to like $1,200 a month in 6 weeks. So that was the first thing. And I really just started relying on the internet as a tool to grow the audience. And it worked really well. And I've leaned more into being the face of this thing, which historically I have hated. I don't like being in photos. I don't like any of that. Most of our album art was art, not pictures, but I've gotten more comfortable with that. Sort of embraced being the, you know, face of this thing. Because, yeah, you know, at this point, I don't think I feel as weird about it, because I literally do everything. And I'm doing it all the time. Like, I've owned this thing now. So that's, for most part, the growth of it. I still work with Ethan is like my right hand with this. He's the guy I started with, and we're still doing everything. We have Alex Coleman in the band on bass now, and mostly it's that trio, me, Ethan, and Alex, that is fronting everything. But, you know, I've got like a rotation of musicians that I still work with. Obviously, this isn't enough to support that many people, so it's not as involved with a lot of the old guys as it used to be. But I still call on them for, you know, all the local gigs and recording. Yeah. And once this does get to a point, I would have every intention of involving them more. But, you know, you got to grow to get there.
Yeah, it probably makes more sense right now to pay them per show versus being like, hey, like, you know, I've got to keep reinvesting, and, you know, it's not easy when everybody else is eating ramen noodles, you know, and doing things. You have to kind of go, you know, take the lead, right? And and what you said earlier, you know, you can't expect the rest of them to put in the effort that you're putting into it, because maybe they're just doing this because they have other jobs, they're doing this as a fun thing to get away from doing what, you know what I mean? Like
I said, you know, the actual career aspect of this, like, some people even think they want to do it, but they don't. Not really. And, like, I do enjoy it. I like the business aspect of these things. I like solving problems, and I really do enjoy. I mean, I like making spreadsheets. Like, it's a hobby of mine to organize things, and so like, yeah, it's just not for everybody.
Yeah.
And that's the honest thing about it too. Is like, it doesn't have to be that for everybody else. But yeah, I started it too big.
Yeah.
Because, you know, I started it as a fun thing. That's what we were doing. But in terms of a viable business, no, it didn't work.
Where does the kind of music, singing, and then also like the kind of your sound, where does the music come from, and then how does your sound sort of develop into what it is today?
Oh, I don't know. I still don't consider myself a singer, but I definitely wasn't at the beginning. I was inspired by Ben Folds because that dude could not sing, really, at the start of his stuff. And, like, you go listen to the first album or two, and, like, he can sing, but it's not, like, Rufus Wainwright or something. Like, it's a different thing. And so I was just like, screw it. Like, I can sing. And I slowly did get better. I think I got more serious about trying to learn how to sing in, like, 2019, 2020. Like, I really wanted to get better. And I'm still working on it. But the development of the music itself, I think it started heavily influenced by Ben Folds and My Chem and stuff. Like, that was always there, but it was a lot more piano-based, a little more ballady, and it was just different. I don't think I leaned into heaviness the same way that I do now, but Insomnia came out in 2018. That had a lot more guitar stuff on it. And then One Big Beautiful Sound was the singles. That was all over the place. Because we were going in and doing 3 songs at once, and I wasn't really writing that much outside the studio. We were just doing it all there, and I was coming up with, like, singing the horn parts back and forth and getting it all worked out. And then We Did Not Ask for This Room. I think of that as I went to college for a music album. It's too complicated. It didn't age well to me.
Yeah.
There's some songs on there that I still love, but, like, most of it is just, like, overperformed, overwritten, overproduced, like, in a way. And then Rapture Waltz was just a super isolated depression record, which I still very much like. But leading to today, I'm always worried that people aren't going to follow me along where I want to go musically, because, like, people ask the genre, and it's piano rock. It is, and there's jazz influence, and there's grunge influence, but, like, sometimes it can go industrial, and sometimes it really is like a Radiohead weird shifty ambient ballad. I don't know. The music develops constantly because I'm always trying to listen to new things, and I think that's a result of me being a producer and engineer, because I'm always trying to find. I don't want any genre to be something I don't like. I'd rather find something in that genre that I enjoy and find the reason why. So I don't know. I've been told that regardless of which direction I've gone so far, there's always some thread that sounds like me, and I hope that stays the case. Unfortunately, I can't identify what that is, so I have no idea.
Yeah. Tell me about the aesthetic stuff, the style, the kind of clothing you wear on stage, like your personal just style as well.
That changed a lot from the beginning. I mean, in the beginning, I was really jazz-minded. We wore suits. Okay. That was not the move. I thought it was funny because it was such a juxtaposition, I guess. Like, I've never been a very appropriate person, really. I've toned back a little bit in some ways, but also less in others. But after that, I didn't really care what I wore intentionally. I guess, like, I don't want uniforms. I don't care.
Yeah.
And the aesthetic, I guess, I always liked the artwork. We have worked since the beginning with Shelby Criswell, and they designed the logo, the little piano logo that I got tattooed. They've designed all the artwork that we had, including We Didn't Ask for This Room. That was a painting by Gentry Leach, but almost everything else has been them. And I think at this point that art is significantly tethered to this band. And I don't know, I just enjoy it. I'm not too worried about the aesthetic directly matching the song. I don't know. The songs can be dark, and lyrically they can be, like, dense subject matter that's not super light, but I've always liked attaching that with artwork and, like, semi-light stuff, because I don't just want it to be heavy and dark all the time.
Yeah.
And then lately, I swear, the older I get, the gayer I get. I swear to God. Like, I've been bisexual for a long time, but, like, I don't know. So, the older I get, I just care a little less. And, like, at some point, my aesthetic, I suppose, personally became, I want to wear fun pants. And that's about it. Other than that, like, I have sort of embraced that because of the fan base of this band. We ended up attracting a lot of LGBTQ fans, and I think the reason is because of the subject matter what I talk about, being very open about mental health and all this stuff, and I think that might have just been a relatable topic. But even though I didn't, like, know it, I always knew there was some stuff there, but, like, the more comfortable I became as I got closer to this fan base, I was just like, this really does feel correct. And I swear, like, the more that I lean into it, the more accurate I feel as a person. So,
and probably the more you get back from it, right? Because, like I said, you're and it's funny you said that, because I said this yesterday to somebody. I think it's so true when you talk to people who are 40, 50, 60 years old. They care less. And for us, it's like, you know, when you're 18, 20, 25, 30, like, you're always worrying about what others are going to think. And when you're, you know, you put it in the context for yourself, and you're seeing your fan base, and they're all out there, and they're telling all their things, and they're just fully embracing who they are at your shows, and then you do that. Clearly, there's a reciprocal, and then, you know, there's an energy there.
I had to figure it out for a while too. I used to make this comparison. You know, The Merchant of Venice, that Shakespeare story. Well, okay, so Shylock is this Jewish merchant, and basically the plot is, by the end of the story, he kind of gets ripped off by this dude, and he demands a pound of flesh for this thing. It's very Shakespearean. Anyway, by the end of the story, in court, he is he loses, and he has to revoke his Judaism and become Christian. That's his punishment. Okay. But as a result, the Jewish community shuns him, and the Christian community shuns him, because he's not a real Christian. And I was a punk growing up, although I never dressed like it because I just didn't care about that part. But, like, that's what I aligned with. And then I was in the military. And so now it felt like neither party really felt
just like, wandering around lost.
Yeah, like I can't be a punk in the army, and they didn't like me in the army very much in my unit. Some of them did, but it was not a great fit. Yeah. And so I really had to sort myself out. I think that experience made it very hard to know what my actual personality was for a long time. So that definitely didn't help. When you're in the military, it does take over your life a little bit as far as your personality and your, you know, there's things you can't say and things you can't do and ways you have to present even when you're in civvies and off duty and all that. But, like, once I was out of that, I think it took a while to, like, come to terms with myself. And lately I've been feeling like an actual human being, like,
that's good.
Cooked, I guess.
Yeah.
I think that's what your 20s are supposed to be, though. And even now, like, I'm not done, but I'm at least aligned with myself. Like, I know myself a bit. So
yeah, well, good. Glad to hear that. Let's dive into March 7th. Big announcement. And then you mentioned 8 singles coming out this year.
8 albums.
8 albums. Yeah, lots. 8 things coming out this year. It's a big year for you, and obviously excited. And are you touring? Can people see you? Like, what's all the things that are happening coming March 7th?
So March 7th is the first single. We're dropping a music video too. But I should say, like, this isn't a single off the record. This year is sort of a fan service year because I didn't want to take so much of a break. And so we do have 8 singles coming out this year starting in March, but they are not on the record. So we're doing 8 singles all the way up till October. In August, we have a big pre-sale campaign for the actual record, which we'll release singles for at the beginning of next year. And so we're talking like 20 to 25 separate songs. Right. These 8 songs this year are not on the record. It's a whole other thing. But mostly these are songs that, like, I wanted to put out. I didn't feel like they totally gelled with the record I wanted to do next year, but I liked them. So we're putting them out. And also March 20th, we leave for a tour. we're doing the last 2 singles right before tour starts out in Long Beach with Adrian Young and Todd Foreman. It's the drummer for No Doubt and the horn player and writer for Sublime.
Okay.
We'll see how that goes. I'm excited about it.
Yeah.
And then we start a tour off at the Roxy in LA and go up all the coast to Vancouver and back down through Salt Lake and Denver. And then we come back for a bit and I'll go back out on the East Coast in May.
Any home shows?
Yeah, we just had one. We played the Blue Note with Nick Parr from Texas, and then we're doing a Resonant Head show in May.
Okay.
We don't play around here too much anymore. Just enough, you know.
Yeah. Do you think your genre and your fan base of music is it easier to tour on the coast versus in Oklahoma?
Yeah.
Much easier. Everything makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I mean we can sell out Chicago.
Yeah.
And we have a hard time filling a room here.
Yeah.
It's just a thing, and the coasts are always easier. The West Coast for sure. Like Seattle is great, LA is great, Portland is great. We do awesome in Chicago and New York.
Yeah.
Philly's given us some trouble, but it's a hard city.
Philly's a hard city for everything.
It's just
right?
It's tough.
There's a lot of stuff going on up there.
And surprisingly, Columbus and Cleveland, we got a whole thing going on, which is strange. But it's I feel like there's this term I was just talking about the other day that I call proximity bias. And I've seen it before. I've even been guilty of it before. But, like, it's the kind of thing, like, let's say, that friend I had, actually, who was out in L.A., he wanted to work with other producers. And I think, myself and other people thought we did better work together, but we're from the same place. And so, naturally, this guy that's from where I'm from couldn't possibly be better than these people out in L.A., But it's the same thing. I think once you start to gain a following outside of where you live, then people start to notice it. But how the band from down the street, they couldn't. Yeah. Like, why do they matter? They're just a band from where I live. Like, it doesn't. It's a thing. So, as we grow outside of Oklahoma, I have noticed that our fan base here is starting to get a bit bigger. Just because the name means something.
Yeah. It's funny you say that. It's so true, because I had Jay Sage, who's an artist, on the podcast recently, and he is in a gallery on Rodeo Drive, and he paints using gunpowder. It's so cool. His artwork's incredible.
Yeah, that was,
he's awesome. But he said the same thing. He's like, I struggle to sell my artwork here, but then I get a call from this huge gallery, and I'm next to Salvador Dali on Rodeo Drive, and, he was just like, it makes no sense. But now people want to buy my art from Oklahoma City, but they've got to buy it through this place in Rodeo Drive versus buying it from my studio when I have a studio.
It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
It's a perception of it, I think. It happens.
Yeah.
And it's fair enough. Because again, I've been guilty of it before. If a band's coming from some other state on tour, they kind of want to go see them. There's the urgency of it as well. I mean, God, a band from Japan came to Norman and everyone freaked out. Didn't even matter who they were.
Right. So, March 7th, keep an eye out for that. People can go to your socials. I'll post the links in the description. Finishing up, though, last question I always ask, because my world is the real estate profession. If you were to build your dream house today, what would your dream home be?
Well, I don't care much about the house for the most part. I'd like, a bathroom with a nice shower, I guess. Maybe 2 sinks so my wife and I don't have to share one. And, bedroom's fine, whatever. The kitchen is what I care about.
All right.
I'm talking 8-burner stove, maybe 2 ovens, just for fun. I'm talking a nice, solid wood island so I can prep stuff, dough, cutting things. I want that. Lots of counter space, floating shelves, just a nice kitchen. If I had my way, I'd have a refrigerator for all of my herbs and stuff, and then have a garden where I could actually grow all that stuff. Something just for all those perishable items. I would do that. Big walk-in pantry, all that stuff. Bedroom's fine, living room, whatever. Definitely have a piano in the house, because of course. And then I'd have a $1.5 million studio in the backyard. Yeah. That's about it. I really don't care. I want to be able to cook and have a cool kitchen. And then other than that, I won't be in my house. Yeah. I'll be in the studio or I'll be on tour.
So cooking's a huge passion then.
I love cooking. Okay. I love cooking. I don't get to do it as much as I wish. I could sometimes just because I get busy or I just am tired. But I do love cooking. I've got an impossible amount of cookbooks to get through. But I love baking too.
I was gonna say, you mentioned like dough. So are you into like the sour bread craze at the moment?
Not sour bread, but I make like a mean lemon blackberry tart.
Okay.
I don't work with bread too much as pastry, I guess.
Okay.
But yeah, I love cooking.
So the blackberry tart is the go-to right now? That's your specialty?
That's one of my favorites. And then if I really want to impress people, I'll do this kind of like Tahitian vanilla bean custard situation with like the caramel brulee.
Yeah.
That's one of my favorites. It's insanely good. My favorite easy meal to cook is vodka marinara penne with Italian sausage, mushrooms, and onion. Like that's my go-to favorite thing to make because it's awesome. But yeah, I'd have a cool kitchen. Yeah. Oh, and of course the hanging rack for all my pans above. Yeah, 100%.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, good to know. People are going to listen to this and be like, okay, well, you're cooking me dinner and I want that custard. So, yeah, you might regret saying that. But, mate, thanks for coming in. Thanks for sharing your story. Really appreciate it. Excited for you to go on some tours this year, travel around, safe travels.
Thanks for having me.
And obviously March 7th. And keep an eye out as well on the socials and all the streaming places that you can hear Johnny and his band at. And for people listening, I'll put the links in the description and we'll catch you next episode. Cheers.
Hope you guys enjoyed that great episode. Thank you so much for listening. As always, huge shout out to our sponsors, the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, sharing Oklahoma story through its people since 1927. For more information on the Oklahoma Hall of Fame, go to www.oklahomahof.com and follow them on Instagram for daily updates at oklahomahof. Our other sponsor, the Chickasaw Nation, amazing sponsor. They do amazing things for the state and they're always sponsoring something in Oklahoma. They're a huge supporter of Oklahoma, and without their support we wouldn't be able to do what we do. And our third sponsor is Diffie Ford Lincoln down in El Reno. Now, this one makes me so happy because these guys are great friends of mine, play a lot of golf together. I've bought my cars from them, do most of my oil changes down there, have a cup of coffee, hang out down in El Reno. It's a good spot to go. And not only are they great friends, but they provide a great service. So for over 60 years, third generation family owned Oklahoma business down in El Reno. They're also in Bethany as well. So people in the Bethany area know the Diffies really well. But if you're looking for anything new, used, Ford, Lincoln, or whatever, I'm sure they could find anything you want. Check them out, diffieford.net, and then on Instagram at diffiefordlincoln. This episode is brought to you by the Doghouse OKC. Recently, I have been in need of some doggy daycare for my 2 pups, and the Doghouse have come in clutch. The team over there are incredible. They've taken care of my 2 golden doodles, and so it's been an honor to partner with them on the podcast and share the love. And the one thing that I do with the sponsors that I have is stuff that I use and recommend, like the Diffies with my car, Hall of Fame. They're awesome. Chickasaw Nation, huge supporter of Oklahoma. And adding to that is the Doghouse. And so if you're in need of doggy daycare in the day or boarding overnight, they do grooming and other cool things too. But I've had a fantastic experience, and it's an honor and a privilege to share this with you too. So go to thedogHouseOKC.com and follow them on Instagram at thedogHouseOKC. And hopefully our pups will run into each other. Turn your dream home into a reality with Home Creations, a family-owned and operated builder with over 40 years of trusted experience right here in Oklahoma. Call Holly at 405-364-9999 to schedule a showing or visit our website for more details. Home Creations, building homes, shaping futures, strengthening communities.
Thank you for listening. We are inspired by those around us and hope that you are too. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review so we can keep telling your stories. For more great Oklahoma content, follow This Is Oklahoma on Facebook and Instagram.